Good afternoon, welcome everybody. My name is Jude Langdon. I'm head of the City office here at Bristol One City, and welcome to what is the latest in our series of One City broadcasts. This one is City Gathering, the Afterparty. Just a quick word before we get going, before I introduce our contributors today about city gatherings. So the city gatherings are a feature of the One City approach. We hold them a couple of times a year, and they essentially bring together people in the city physically in a room who want to take action together in progressing the One City plan. We typically have between about 200 and 300 people. So we hold them a couple of times a year in a big hall. The most recent one was in City Hall here. And they're all about building connection and about inspiring action towards implementing the One City plan. So we know they are the hottest tickets in town, and we know that not everybody who wants to be able to join us at these events is always able to do so. So for the first time, we're trying to open up the event in our own way to an even wider audience by holding this wash-up conversation, so more people can hear a bit about what happened at the event and take part in what's happening in the next steps. So last month then we held that most recent city gathering, just shy of a month ago now. And this one was focused on our One City mission about creating an inclusive, sustainable, equitable economy. They're always really exciting, really stimulating events, but really what's important is about what happens next. So we brought the band back together. We have with us a fantastic collection of people who helped lead the workshops in the day. And we're going to have a bit of a conversation around what stood out for them and what comes next in terms of pushing forward on this mission. So before we continue, I'm going to go around the screen and ask everybody who's here today to introduce themselves. So if I can ask you each, could you tell us your name, tell us the workshop that you led, and I'm just bringing this one on you, as this one is focused upon the economy, I'd like you to tell me, what was the first thing you can remember buying with your own money? So I'm going to go Pally, then Grace, then Mark to start us off. Pally?
Thanks, Jude. So yes, my name's Professor Pally Smart. I'm a professor in the business school at the University of Bristol. I also co-chair with Councillor Andrew Brown, the Skills and Economy Board. I also have another co-chair position in the city, focusing on business in the community's Pride of Place programme. Jude, I've forgotten the second question.
What was the first thing you bought with your own money, Pally?
My own money? Oh gosh, I think it was one of two things. I don't know if any of you will remember this, but there used to be a little doll's head, and you could make her hair and you could make her face. I'm pretty sure I put some money towards that, and if it wasn't that, it's quite possible it wasn't that, then it will have been my first David Bowie album.
Oh, of course, fantastic taste as well.
Actually, no, it was just a single. Couldn't afford an album, just a single.
Thanks, Pally. Who did I say next? Was it Grace?
Yeah, that was me. So my name's Grace Biddulph, and I work in the Equity and Inclusion team here at Bristol City Council. So I support a lot with our citywide partnerships related to equality. So we have a variety focused on different characteristics and kind of a different level with city leaders. The workshop that I was facilitating was entitled Closing the Gap, Pay Equity in Bristol's Workplaces. So back in April this year, the government announced some new legislation, which was mandatory reporting on ethnicity and disability pay gaps for employers of 250 or more. So that was on top of gender. So felt like a really timely kind of situation to hold some citywide conversations around what that kind of means, what that looks like, and how we can support each other, not only to be reporting, but removing barriers for people with different characteristics in our workforces. And the first thing I bought, I think, was probably definitely food-based. So I remember spending quite a lot of money at a nearby Londist on a lot of sweets, really. So not great for you, but yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Grace. Mark?
Yeah. So I'm Mark Jacobs. I'm an environmental scientist. I was one of those people who helped found and support the development of Sparks in the town centre. I'm a member of the One City Environment Board and also co-chair of the Bristol Repair Coalition. And the workshop I chaired was on the circular economy. And I'm sure that'll become obvious as we discuss it further. My memory of what I bought, I think it has to be pineapple chunks as well. You know, the sweets. But what I remember saving for, unsurprisingly, was my first bicycle.
So on brand.
Exactly.
And then we go Orla and then David.
Hello, I'm Orla. I work for Business in the Community. I'm a strategic partnerships manager and I look after our Pride of Place program, which I can talk about a bit later. And Pally and I were both on the Power Place workshop, so looking at place-based approaches to equitable economy. And what the question was, what I remember spending money on first or saving for first. Whatever we want. I think similar to Grace, definitely food-based. Penny sweets that used to cost a penny and were no longer a penny. We're definitely high up on the list. Freddo bars were meant to be 25p, not quite 25p anymore. And I think similar to Mark, I remember saving the little bit of money I did get for lunch. I sometimes wouldn't buy lunch and saved it over many months to get a camera.
Oh, very cool. Love it. David?
Yeah. So David Harrigan, post 16 and leak reduction team leader, and I'm just bringing up the title. So we did the No Young Person Left Behind in a response to NEAT. And the one thing I remember buying is do you remember that it's a mixture, the tiny plastic men that you would throw in the air with a parachute attached to the back.
Oh yeah.
And then the ones that had the little sticky hands, the fists. And you would throw them at a window and then wait for like 30 minutes when they roll down. Then they would lose their stickiness and end up on the carpet. And then your parents would go after you. So those is what I remember. That and the little foam aeroplanes. There was the three things that you can still buy today, but then we always bring up to the kids, but they still last. So they still work.
That's such a brilliant nostalgia fest. Thank you, David. Great. So with those introductions then, so we're going to look back first of all at the gathering. We had, for those of you who were able to join us, we had an amazing keynote from Andy Haldane, who is the president of the British Chambers of Commerce and also former chief economist at the Bank of England, who talked us through some really provocative, in a good way, points around how we as a city can shape the local economy and make sure that it works for everybody. We had a lot of workshops, which you've all heard about, or had introduced just now. We had offers and asks. We even had some singing. So my first question to each of the contributors then is just briefly, no more than 1 or 2 minutes, what was your main takeaway from the city gathering? Was it a particular conversation, something that someone said that really stayed with you, a theme? And I think perhaps I'll go back in reverse order then. So I'm going to go David, then all of them will work back round. David?
Yeah, because I didn't really get to sit in the room because I was mainly in my room. But most of the feedback that we get, I think it was the actual energy and the amount of questions that we got. We weren't expecting that. Me and Jane left about a time after we kind of presented the data, but the amount of feedback from everybody in the room, the constant questions being asked, it was great. And the one thing that kind of stood out for us was we had a gentleman saying that he wanted to do more. We wanted to hire more young people, but limitations on national insurance, and the fact that he was having to reduce down his fixed staff account and kind of bring in just hires as ad hoc, and how that was impacting the everyday economy. And most of our young people who are NEAT are trying to access the everyday economy, and they're trying to move into that kind of space as an entry-level role. And it was just a lack of those positions being open. Because the businesses need to look after effectively themselves without, if there's nothing there, an incentive for them, what are we going to do? But that was one of the things that came back and really stuck with me. So then we were able to ask that question to all the local authorities to see if they were seeing the same from other businesses. And when we went to the Birmingham event regarding the Trailblazer, was something that we were able to feedback within groups, and they were saying the same, that they were hearing from employers as well.
That's so interesting, and interesting that something from that kind of hyper local is already working its way up into national discussions. Really, really interesting. Thanks, David. All over about you, what stood out for you?
Similar to David, maybe that like engagement is really impressive. I think I've been to a few different city gatherings, not too many, but that kind of spirit of like collective action, it comes through really strong. Like it's just amazing to see so many, like a variety of so many partners in one room, like businesses and charity leaders and police forces and educators and faith groups, and kind of all coming together under one roof is really positive. And then in our workshop itself, it kind of came through in the different ways that people engaged and the asks and the offers that we got. That it's just that kind of spirit of one city came through strong. So that was really nice to see in action.
Excellent, thank you. Mark, I think I should work out which order you went in now. I think, Mark, that makes you next, doesn't it?
Yeah. I think the again the suggestions in the room were incredibly valuable, and I think all of us who've joined boards want to, as you do, want to turn it from a talking shop into an environment and a community of people who make things happen. And I think the way to do that is to run the kind of workshop formats, and then to take that forward as we are doing now, and as we I hope we will do into the future, because the discussions come up with tangible suggestions. And I was just delighted that on my workshop, we had a very practical proposition here about the multi-bank, which Andy Street presented from Bristol Charities. Jack Boyden talked about all the ways in which Bristol Waste could contribute more to the circular economy, and Laura Fogg-Rogers from University of West of England as well in terms of the education. So I think just the practical offers and asks that came out of that we can now take forward and make it of value.
Awesome, thank you, Mark. And I think that's absolute music to my ears, because as you said, that is always the biggest challenge with One City, is the converting the fantastic intent and goodwill and somehow translating that into something tangible, specific. And the more we can shift in that direction, the better, really. So it's great. That's really great to hear. Grace, how about you? What stood out for you?
Yeah, so I was lucky enough to be joined by 3 experts on my panel. So we had Jules Davis from Curiosity Unlimited, who's doing some brilliant work around making Bristol the UK capital of civil rights. Megan Belcher from Disability Equality Forum, and then Crystal McNamara from the Women in Business Charter. So all had like amazing expertise in looking at kind of equality and economic equality for different groups across the city. I'm going to go with 2 key takeaways. So the first is that you don't have to be an employer of 250 to be doing this work. So although the legislation, the kind of statutory element applies to those larger organisations, lots of smaller organisations are also kind of doing the work in different ways and have lots of kind of golden nuggets of information to share. So you don't have to kind of be a large employer to do the work around pay gaps. I kind of appreciate it does take some resource to measure and kind of take action on it, but it's not a necessity. And then the second one, which started really right from the offset of when I was kind of planning the workshop with the 3 experts, was that we need to be thinking intersectionally when it comes to pay gaps. So not just thinking about race, disability and gender separately, but thinking about the kind of when those characteristics are layered, how that kind of affects how much money you earn, what access to opportunities you get within the workplace. So say, for example, if you're a Black disabled woman, you have the kind of least access to resources within workplaces. So from the offset, really trying to think about what are kind of the different layers of complexity around pay gaps and experiences in workforce.
Really interesting, and it was great. I think your workshop, you were able to be joined by that range of kind of contributors who were kind of co-leading it with you. I think just gives an example, doesn't it, again, of the sort of richness and as always, the way people want to contribute in One City, which is so inspiring. And then last but by no means least, so Pally, you were in the same workshop as Orla, but you're no stranger to city gathering. So you've seen a few. What was your reflections on this one, and what was your takeaway from this gathering?
Yeah, I think I was particularly excited about this. I'm excited about all of them, and I think all of them have really high levels of engagement, and there's a real excitement around the room when we have them. I think my biggest takeaway from this one, because I co-chair the Skills and Economy Board, and the focus was very much on a sustainable, inclusive and equitable economy. What stood out for me, if there's one thing that stood out for me, it was that Andy Haldane made it easy for us to talk about wealth creation in a way that we tend not to do in Bristol. We tend to shy away from using that kind of language and not quite appreciating that, you know, wealth creation is a route. It's an important route to raising living standards and long-term prosperity and productivity and innovation in a space. And I thought that was really good. And he was able to do that without making it sound like everything depended on productivity and innovation, but actually it was very much productivity in the round, or a new kind of productivity that recognises that growth in the economy is absolutely central to prosperity, but it has to be inclusive. It has to be for everyone. So that was my big takeaway, that wealth creation, these are great words, and we should kind of embrace that, but in a rounded fashion. And I think Paul Smith in our workshop brought that home very clearly when he said, you know, got to create more wealth. We've got to make sure that the parents are on board and the kids are on board, and we can give everybody a job and they can earn their own money. You know, we'll have made a massive leap and stride in Hartcliffe.
Yeah, it was a really inspiring speech, wasn't it? And I think perhaps I'll kind of put a pin in this, perhaps it's one for later, but one I'm kind of quite keen to explore a bit actually was about how I think he started to draw out the relationship between what we want to do here in Bristol and how that sits in the context of a regional and national picture.
Yes.
Around growth, around the growth strategy, but equally with our lens around equity.
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting to think through how those agendas kind of dovetail with one another. Perhaps we'll come back to that in a little while. So thank you for that. That's great. So I think what we'll do with the next sort of 10 to 15 minutes maybe is if we perhaps dive a little bit more deeply into each of the workshops. So we think about our audience sitting at home eating their cornflakes or whatever it is you might be doing while you're watching this. But for those who maybe weren't able to come into each of those workshops, perhaps we could just sort of expand a little bit on what we covered and what those kind of key themes were. So I'm going to start, David, with the workshop you and Jane led on No Young Person Left Behind. So perhaps you can tell us a little bit about what you covered and then just think through, I guess, what were the kind of strongest messages coming out from that. Anything else you'd like to share with people who weren't able to do on your workshop?
Yeah, so our workshop was aimed and tailored at kind of having a look at the numbers of NEET young people across the city and those effectively that we were predicting to become risk of NEET, and the correlation that we were able to see from the NEET cohort and the ones at risk, which areas of Bristol they kind of lived in, and the duration of how long they've been NEET, and some of the protected characteristics. We know that young people with an EHCP are 3 times more likely to become NEET than individuals without an education, health and care plan. So that we kind of presented at that point. And the main kind of questions we wanted to kind of feedback was, having heard the presentation, what the businesses and organizations can kind of help us do to kind of reduce down the numbers of NEET young people from across the city. And we had a QR code up, we were able to get some kind of feedback, and a lot of it was just about collaboration. Just picking out a few ones from here. Red Cats Community Garden was talking about their supported trauma-informed placements to ensure that young people can succeed in a safe environment and kind of draw out and learn those skills. They kind of reduce down why they become NEET and then also move on to employment. We have Bristol Waste Company, who was telling us they had loads of jobs with low entry level, but that were real living wage. And how could we collaborate further to kind of bring our cohort of NEET young people, and how we could link them up as a kind of talent pipeline and those kind of services. And then again, when we asked what was needed from us, and again, it's more data and insight. It's getting access to those young people. It's promoting those opportunities to the right young people in a hyper-local space to ensure that they're able to kind of find those jobs and have a supported, trusted adult to kind of facilitate those conversations. So we're able to link the employers up with the young people. And if they're not ready, what is it that we could do as a service to get those young people ready? And we're able to do that through our programs, through Youth Guarantee Trailblazer and the Boost Your Future programs. So that was the main kind of link that we had. And that was a taste of what we were discussing on today.
Fantastic. And that, again, that does link into what Andy was saying to us, wasn't it, around how, he talked about how all labour markets are local in the end. And also about, I suppose, keeping this human. Sometimes the economy can feel like a slightly sort of abstract set of forces, but actually what you're talking about there is real humans, people, relationships. How we can,
and again, I think for a lot of our young people, the first kind of barrier that they have is actually the application process themselves. So we know a lot of young people could send out multiple applications and never hear back, and that just disheartens young people within the labour market. So if you wanted to break that barrier down, 2-week work tasters that we do through the Youth Guarantee process allows young people to actually be in the world of work, having that real world experience, and then the employer gets to know the young person, and then that has led to a lot of young people getting employment or apprenticeships. So effectively by doing, and that's what the DWP are looking to roll out in the next few months, is their new program to kind of encourage more young people who are out of work long term to enter back into the employment market through longer work tasters that are paid at the national minimum wage. So all the stuff that we're talking about here is actually rolling out wider from the work that we do from the Trailblazer program, which is excellent.
Yeah, and great to hear that we're, at the leading edge of that work. So real credit to you and your team around that. I'm going to keep us rolling through the workshops, if that's all right. So Grace, if I come to you, so you've given us a beautiful description already about what you're focusing on around pay equity in the workplace. And so for you, I guess, what came out through that workshop? What did it reveal about the current picture, or any sense of kind of practical actions that organisations could be taking now? Or, what came out of it for you?
Yeah, so I think a kind of high level reflection was some organisations are reporting but with limited action plans. So there's a lot of kind of complex methodology that goes behind pay gap reporting, and some organisations have kind of grasped that element but haven't yet gotten to kind of the action plan. So that feels like the phase 2. So I think for organisations perhaps starting out on this journey, trying to think of it as a holistic package where they fit together is a really good starting point. So Megan from Disability Equality Forum shared some really interesting research. So this research took place in 2024, and it showed no correlation with fairer treatment, job satisfaction, or improved mental health for disabled people in organisations that have signed up to the Disability Confidence Scheme. So just because a large employer or a large organisation has that badge doesn't mean that they kind of know what disability equality within the workforce looks like. So organisations not just kind of relying on that badge and that framework to as a way of minimising disability pay gaps. And Megan also shared that access to work on average is 109 days for an employee to kind of get their application processed. So again, if you're an employer in the city, not just relying on access to work, but making sure adjustments are kind of in from day one. Jules on kind of race pay gaps, again, shared some really interesting insights. So the national employment ethnicity employment gap is 37 billion. So that's about the same size as the West of England Combined Authority kind of economic region. So if we're thinking on a national scale, if we unlocked the kind of or completely eradicated those ethnicity pay gaps, the kind of the potential that we would unlock is massive. And then related to gender pay gaps, so Crystal was sharing that so she's part of a Women in Business Charter. So signatories can sort of sign up, and they've got a framework. So on the whole, signatories of that charter outperform UK median benchmark for gender pay gap. So it demonstrates kind of significant improvements in minimising those pay gaps. A really interesting kind of nugget of information I thought was one of their charter signatories had done kind of an audit of some of their roles within their organisation and undertook a rebranding of some of the lower paid roles. So they're the kind of roles we traditionally associate with kind of the secretarial roles. And actually, when they kind of did this analysis, it did feel like they were quite gendered. So they did a rebranding of their kind of lower paid roles. And actually, the outcome was that they started seeing more male applicants, which then contributed to closing their gender pay gaps. So just trying to think, I think, creatively around how you minimize those pay gaps.
Yeah, jump on there, Grace. I'm actually really so. What kind of rebranding was that?
So perhaps what I'll do is contact Crystal and get some kind of, because she'll be able to give me the concrete, because I think they picked out particular words, and I have seen it done elsewhere actually, where some kind of words or phrases, different genders react differently to whether they're a positive or negative to them. So like things like, oh, we operate as a family and things like that. That probably means different things to men and women. So actually trying to take a gender neutral approach to how you write your job descriptions might mean that you see an increase in different genders applying for them. But I can definitely ask Crystal for some more kind of detail on that particular example. But they did see an increase in male applicants. So yeah. And then just to wrap up to say, again, on the gender pay gap, there are some organisations across the city who are doing really good work. So Summative now have a negative gender pay gap, and TLT actually halved their gender pay gap over 4 years. So there's change happening to kind of end on a positive note. But yeah, that's some reflections from my workshop.
That's great. Thank you, Grace. And great, and it is encouraging, isn't it, actually, to feel like, again, this is something we have agency over. Like all the things we're going to be talking about today, these are not kind of, so these sort of like forces of nature. They're actually things that we can take action and make change as a collection of organisations. Yeah, really great. Thank you.
Yeah, and just to say one more thing, Jude, I've just thought of is, I think often, especially within public sector organisations, we want to think of our workforces as representative of the communities that we serve, and that's our overall goal. But also remembering that some of our workforce are members of those communities, so not trying to think of them kind of separately, I think is helpful. But that's it from me. Thank you.
That's important. Thank you for that. Great. Okay, I'm keep moving. So, Mark. So you had the circular economy workshop. Can I actually just ask by saying it occurred to me from a conversation I had in the office earlier on, I should probably start by saying, could you explain to our listeners what we mean by the circular economy? Because I sometimes fall into the trap of thinking that everyone knows what we're talking about. And actually, I think that would be a good place to start.
I think it's a good suggestion, because I think we'll define it. And then I think you'll realise, and hopefully those watching will realise, how important it is as part of this conversation around creating jobs, wealth in the city, finding new ways to engage young people in particular. So you kind of got that. I would say there are kind of 3 basic principles behind the circular economy. One is design out waste and pollution. So materials are more easily recovered and reused. Keep products in use would be another tenet. These are not just mine, by the way. These are kind of accepted definitions. So share and repair is a really important part of it. It's one of the reasons why we have a repair coalition in Bristol and Library of Things and other initiatives here in the city. And use less. So make use of what we know are scarce resources on our planet. And there is no planet B. We have to make more efficient use of what we have. And that in itself, if you put all 3 of those together, are an amazing way of creating new employment and engaging, in particular, young people in an ambition of achieving a circular economy. And it's what we need to do, and it's what actually we will have to do. So we discussed in the workshop ways of achieving that. We talked about inspiring projects overseas. We talked about an amazing place in Sweden called Retuna, where we have 14 shops, all thriving on what's called the world's first recycling mall of the local recycling centre. We talked about, I've just recently seen incredible projects in Sweden where the public libraries have been turned into areas where you can share and repair things as well. When you walk in, you get a free sewing machine to use. You get a 3D printer if you need one as well, and a library of things in that too. We've got the amazing project in Manchester where you a kind of hub where you can actually fix and repair things in there. They take in huge amounts of material as well. And then, of course, we have the ambition in Bristol to create the multi-bank. And in our workshop, we looked at kind of practical propositions in Bristol. We talked about what we can do. The multi-bank is an interesting initiative started in 2022 by Gordon Brown, the first one in Fife. I believe there's 6 now up and down the country. And they combine sort of food banks and clothes banks and baby banks all under one roof. So you can create a hub which can then serve other parts of the community where these items are kind of cleaned up, fixed, or simply gathered in where there's surplus materials. And we have another project in Bristol called Factory X, which is trying to do that with building materials. So I think the ambition would be, you know, where do we go from green capital? It's quite a long time ago now. We were the first in Europe, you know, 2015, and there's a lot more to be done. And other cities and other initiatives worldwide have shown what's possible. And those of us in the room are determined not to get left behind. And we can see that as a way of not only serving environmental needs, but the needs of the whole community. If you look at what you define as just transition, it's about creating jobs for people. It's about giving materials to people who don't have them. And I volunteer myself at one of the local recycling centres in Bristol, and I see just how much material could still be retrieved, saved, reused and fixed and returned to people who simply don't have it. So that was the kind of focus of the workshop, and we have a fantastic selection of offers and asks, which I could go through a few if you wanted me to, or I could save them.
Oh, give us 1 or 2 of your highlights.
Oh, they're just great. I mean, so, you know, Voska, you know, we're offering to help extend reach into community groups, and we're looking to create a partnership with Bristol Waste to do so. Also increase reach into volunteering from business groups was being offered at the discussions as well. Travel West, we're offering more Dr. Bike pop-ups. Visit West, we're offering maps and info on sustainability hubs across the city to help prepare that as well. Retrofit West, we're offering to promote the reuse of materials. The diocese, the churches, we're offering to host repair cafes. 7net have an offers and ask app, apparently we could be using. We the Curious, we're offering to bring the circular economy into the way in which they educate families. So I could go on, but it's really tangible series of suggestions.
That's fantastic. Yeah, genuinely really inspiring. And like you said, it's a really great summary you've given there, Mark, I think, of how something that I guess on the surface might seem like a kind of environmental initiative, and it is, but how it just so immediately intersects with the economy, with kind of social systems, with, you know, with everything. This is not an isolated bubble, is it? Actually, this is about how we want to do business.
I just did a very quick check before this recording, and LinkedIn is saying there's more demand for green jobs and skills than there is talent. Price Waterhouse have got a green jobs barometer. Green jobs are growing at 4 times the pace of the employment market. Office of National Statistics have also got figures to do the same. So it's really important that the circular economy is right at the heart of some of these discussions.
I'm just going to warn David now that I'm saying what I'm going to do. I'm going to hear the final workshop, and then I think I'd really like to hear your thoughts actually around the kind of the green jobs economy and where that is leading us for young people. That'd be a really interesting avenue to explore. But you can think on that for a moment, because first of all, I'd love to hear from Orla and Pally about the Power of Place workshop and how that was for you. What stood out for you from it?
Who would like to go
Orla,
first?
do you want to go first? You can
Sure,
go first.
I can give an intro and give some thoughts and pass to you. So yeah, our workshop was all about place-based approaches to equitable economy. So business in the community, we're working across Bristol, but in particular in Hartcliffe and Withywood is our area of focus. So that was kind of the topic, the area, I guess, the place of our workshop. And we were talking about how we're working with businesses and trying to kind of drive good growth in Hartcliffe and Withywood and across Bristol, and how we're doing that and getting businesses behind different initiatives, in particular relating to employability and skills. So quite an overlap with David's work and the team there. And we were also joined by Paul Smith, who is, amongst many other things, he's the chair of the Pride in Place programme in Hartcliffe and Withywood, who, for those who don't know, is a government programme with, I think, 20 million of funding across 10 years. And so they are also working in Hartcliffe and Withywood and have a neighbourhood board there who are coming up with priorities for what it is that might look like. And we, as a group of businesses, are working closely with Paul and the Pride in Place neighbourhood board to understand how businesses can kind of support and have the most impact. So for our workshop, we kind of shared different examples about what we're doing, and ultimately we kind of asked the group of attendees what they thought the kind of opportunities in this space was, what the barriers were, and what the role of business was in terms of place-based approaches to equitable economy. Some of the opportunities that were discussed, I think a lot of examples were given of things that worked really well already. So some common examples were the likes of Ambition, Lawrence Weston, for example, and all the great work that Mark Pepper and the team there have done, and the work that they did to kind of bring the community along with them. So that kind of people were rightly were saying that it's really important in these situations to kind of give power to the community and give ownership to the community of what is happening, and kind of trusting that the community know what's best for them. So I think the Pride in Place programme and the neighbourhood board is kind of really well set up to do that and to make sure that the community's voice is really at the centre. So that came through quite strongly, I think, in terms of opportunities. And then I think what Pali was mentioning about wealth creation, that's something that's really important for Paul as well, because I think he kind of acknowledges a lot of the challenges that an area like Hartcliffe faces is because of poverty, and it's kind of a cause of a lot of other symptoms. And by improving poverty and increasing wealth, those issues will become less. So it's kind of about bringing people along that journey and supporting people building skills and getting qualifications and getting jobs or moving into better jobs. So moving from jobs to careers was something that is really important for Paul, and something that we hope the businesses will be able to help as well. And I guess that kind of brings me to the role of business, which a lot of people had a lot of different thoughts on. And I guess it's kind of why business in the community exists. But some ideas from the group, a lot of it was about how businesses can kind of get involved in social value opportunities and support charities, especially when it comes to skills. So like joining boards of trustees, particularly, or really kind of using skills to support a local charity or like community interest company, or using your kind of supply chain, choosing to procure from a local charity, as well as businesses getting involved in those kind of local initiatives, especially when it comes to employment. So some of the ones that David mentioned, like South Bristol Youth Guarantee, something we've been getting the businesses behind. There's also Bristol Works. There's lots of really great initiatives all around Bristol. So how can your business be involved in kind of supporting young people and adults with their kind of skills development and employment opportunities? I think those are some key things that came out for me. But Pali, I'm sure you had other thoughts.
Yeah, actually, you've echoed some of the things that that really stood out for me too, and I'll just emphasise again the link between getting young people out of poverty, or families out of poverty, and wealth creation. I mean, that definitely came through very strongly with Paul, and I think that's an important link actually with Business in the Community's Pride of Place programme. So collaboration between those two programmes, we call them POP and PIP, I think is going to be really quite important as we go forward. So yes, that came through very importantly, and of course linked to that is the need for investment, and of course this 20 million pounds over 10 years, Paul reminded us, is not a lot of money. It's very welcomed, very pleased to have it, but went on to sort of, look back before we move forward. Barton Hill had 50 million 10, 15 years ago, and we can stand back now and say, well, what did that achieve? And I think the point that he was trying to make is that at the end of the day, it won't be about shiny buildings, because they'll look old in 15 years anyway. It'll be about whether you can take hearts and minds and people and infrastructure, particularly social infrastructure, with you, and can you change aspirations in a place, or can you create pride in a place? And on the matter of pride, it was quite interesting. a spur of the conversation moved into, well, it's not people in these places that don't have pride in those places. It's actually people that don't belong to those places are the ones that don't have pride in those places. So it's quite interesting. And I think that's something worth surfacing as we get into
Definitely.
the Pride of Place program. Is that actually true, or is it a nice idea? So, and how do you create pride in a place, a place where you love you want to be, you want your families to be, and you want to see them there grow up, sort of longer term.
Just with an eye on the clock, I'm suddenly regretting that we have only an hour for this conversation, because I feel like we could have easily run it over 2, but an hour is what we have. So if it's okay, I'm going to pose that question that I kind of teed up earlier to Mark and David, and then perhaps we can open it up then just for 5 to 10 minutes at most of kind of conversation around themes that came out kind of spanning these workshops. So this one about green skills and the green economy, so Mark's given us some really interesting information there around how that is developing as a kind of key area. Are you seeing that, David, and are you kind of teeing up?
No, I think the green skills and the green economy has been, for the last couple of years, it's been bounced around, and employers have been coming and they kind of through Bristol Works and kind of putting it in front of young people and talking about sustainability, retrofit, how we can effectively, move young people into these careers and into these kind of jobs and roles. But I think it comes back to what Orla was saying, when it doesn't really matter what the job title is, it's whether or not it's accessible, and whether or not the young people are started off with the skills to be able to move into those careers. One thing that's missing from a lot of young people is those transferable skills. What can they, if they start off their career in one job and all of a sudden all these green careers and green skills opportunities arise, how is it they can move in without it being a barrier that you need university degree at the end of it? Well, or not you need to start off at a level 4 apprenticeship to move into it. If you don't have your English and maths and you can't do a level 3, then you can't move on to a pre-degree kind of apprenticeship program. So it's about breaking down the avenues into those roles. And if there is employers out there that have those roles coming up and they have them in the next few years, why isn't it that they're linked directly in with sixth forms or colleges to kind of speak to the young people there to kind of develop those talent pipelines directly into those roles? If they were able to link up closer with those settings and link them closer with schools, but like what Burgess Salmon used to do, they used to sponsor a school so their name would be out there, you would be able to see the employer, exactly what they're about because they would come in and do talks. If you're able to do more of that in each of the school settings across the city and the colleges, then effectively you wouldn't have the gaps in the skills, because you're able to kind of move those young people into those roles and into those opportunities, because effectively they're starting off in a job that's well paid and then building their careers from there. And then it's also making those roles, again, has to come down to the accessibility factor. If they can't even get through the application process, then you might be missing a load of young people in those areas who might be brilliant for those roles.
I've got a question for David then, given you suggest this could be two-way, but it's an interesting challenge, the access, transferable skills. How do you get young people engaged in parts of the city that might otherwise not consider this as something they might see as part of their future? And I noticed that in our workshop, like again under my offers and asks, there are at least 2 councillors offering to be part of a discussion about how we do that as a city. How can we prove these opportunities and how can we address these challenges, and offering to help with it? So in the spirit of one city, and taking these conversations forward practically, can you see a way of doing that?
Yeah, I think linking in with the councillors, linking in with the schools, they kind of work closer together. Is that what you're asking, Mark?
Yes. I mean, what would be required to do that? Because it's a sort of aspiration one can suggest here, but I'm always going,
it comes down to that relationship kind of buy-in, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Like, it's great that you start, and again, I love
is
a
it a
steering
workshop
group.
or, is it
But workshops kill me, because then nothing comes off the back of it.
Yeah,
and it's again, when someone says they want to have a workshop or a steering group or I don't like them, because you don't get actions and outcomes and everything else that comes off the back with it. So usually going down the project management route, what you need is an agreed PID. Who's going to be in and who's going to be held accountable to ensure those actions actually get done. Because once you're holding someone the account off the back of it, be it a multi-academy trust from a school's perspective, whether or not you're bringing in Colleges West, which links in across the whole city from, what is it? City of Bristol College, SGS, you have Bath in there, you've got Weston College, and you
Weston.
also have St. Brendan's. Once you bring all of them in together, and they're all in within those kind of Colleges West, why isn't it they're being held accountable to move those young people into that role? Because if Melbourne's saying that after 18, the NEET population increases threefold, then there's something going wrong there because they're not moving those young people into the right careers. So that's what you would need. I would never focus on that, on just having the discussion. You would need to effectively get everybody in the room and agree the actions and the accountability, because that's what's missing.
Yeah. Okay. And so, last question on that is: do you think One City can help with that?
Still my question mark.
Yeah.
Because
I suppose
that's the yeah.
It all depends of who you get the buy-in from. It's a great idea, and One City's brilliant, but then again, too many cooks, so you want it aligned down and streamlined enough. And then again, who's going to be the one responsible for linking in with the employers? Is that going to come from One City? Is that going to come from Ireland business in the community? Who's going to be linking on this? They link on that side, because. And then again, if you're going to have a counsellor attached to it, is it going to sit with the economy and skills, or is it going to be in children's and education, because it has to start from one and then handhold and dovetail into the other, because it does move through. It probably could help with it. But again, it'd be good to get under the bones of it and kind of flesh it out to see who is going to be held accountable for the roles and responsibilities of it, what it looks like. And then making sure the employers have the appetite to keep it going. Because if they're asking for the green skills and they're asking for it, and they want the best young people, it's not about bringing in people from outside. It's about bringing in the people from the area that you're in. And one point that we want to raise is that we did a community conversation in North Bristol, and we were chatting to a few, and we shared this when we did the group. And a couple of the mums that were there as part of this community conversation is how well we could kind of work with them in the community. What do they need? Whenever we asked them about the GK and aerospace Rolls Royce that they could see an Airbus that they could see down the road, some of the mums actually told us that those jobs aren't for their kids. That's not for us. So they don't have that aspiration themselves to their own children. And when you compare that to one of the mums who came along, she used to shoplift in Iceland consistently, to the point where they were constantly having to call the police. So the manager actually talked to her and asked her why she was shoplifting. So we got into the question of the why. And it was to feed their family at home. So instead of actually penalizing them, they gave her a job. And she says she worked there for 10 years. So you can either do it in one way, is where people say it's not for them and they can't get into that role. But then you have one employer who took a chance on one young person who was causing absolute havoc in the shop, and effectively brought them in and sustained that employment for that amount of time. So, and until she had multiple kids, and then she was like, I had to leave because I've got more kids at home. And that was the only reason she left the role. She would happily go back part-time or full-time. And the job's there for her when she needs to go back. So.
Grace, do you ever hear that in your line of work, the idea that this is not for me, the idea that certain roles, certain industries just feel, out of reach, or, not a pathway that is open to people from different backgrounds? Is that a theme that emerges in your world?
Yeah, definitely. I think it kind of builds on what Mark and David were saying about this kind of more longitudinal look at a kind of, I guess, like a life course approach around what kind of your education, access to education into employment looks like. And not only just kind of that first, do I have transferable skills to get my first job, but even when kind of you're in the workplace, the kind of jobs that different groups go into. And especially for ethnicity, we see a really high proportion of racially minoritized people in lower paid roles. And that's probably because of a lifetime of not having the same kind of access to opportunities. And especially for disabled people as well, especially in leadership positions across the city. There's a massive lack of diversity for disabled people and racially minoritized people. So I think when we're thinking about kind of a citywide picture of where does money sit and how does that, you know, who gets kind of like the higher paid jobs compared to the lower paid jobs, that's definitely something that we do see. So that's why you know, ensuring that you've got tailored approaches within your kind of workforce or within your workplace that recognizes the kind of experiences that people come from, to make sure that they have kind of the access to the resources that they need to thrive in those workplaces as well.
Great.
I think
So,
Jude,
sorry, go on briefly then, Pally,
Yeah.
if you would.
I was just thinking that there's something here about aspiration as well, because even for our graduates, you know, getting a job at GKN or Rolls-Royce isn't a walk in the park. It's tough. It's really tough. It's very competitive. And, you know, they have an international labor force. So but at least those kids think, well, that's the kind of job I want. So I think actually you've got to raise aspiration high enough to actually think, it could be achievable, but if not here, maybe in a company like it. So I think there's something there about aspiration, because even those that do have access still have some of those concerns that it may still not be for them. But you've got to raise aspirations sufficiently high enough to think something like that
Is achievable.
Yeah, it's aspiration and the ability to feel that you can travel out of the area that you're currently living in. Because a lot of our young people in South and North Bristol, it's just not accessible for them to travel into the centre. And that's what they see it as. They can't see themselves travelling in. And again, if they've never had to make that journey previously, that's the barrier to work, and how we can kind of work with that.
So important. And I actually feel like it's like a whole webinar, podcast,
a whole new thing
itself, absolutely, which we will definitely return to at some point.
Yeah.
So but just to kind of draw this to a conclusion then, so we've had this rich conversations in all these groups, clearly some, you know, really interesting themes emerging. So just briefly, I'm going to go round the circle, around the room, and so in as succinctly as you can, what next and how can the City Office help? So all on Pally, you can do it together if you want. You can do a double act. What's next for you? How can we help?
Yeah, I mean, for me, given that I work in a university, I think skills is going to be really, really key. And if we can join up dots around skills within the region, that's really important with Colleges West and Universities West. I think once the skill strategy and the LSIP is finalised, that we try and get behind that and think about entry-level jobs into those industries where young people can think, yeah, actually that's a good start for me, or that's achievable for me, and go from there.
And Pally, what's the LSIP?
Oh, the LSIP is the local skills improvement plan.
Thank you. And Ola, do you want to pick up the how can City Office help point?
Yeah. Oh, well, I was going to pick up the first point, but actually, yeah, I think I'll get to that too. But I think with any of these, obviously BITC, business and community, is all about getting businesses involved and being forces for good. So I'm engaged with some businesses in the city, but there's so many in Bristol, especially in the SME sector, that if all businesses could come together and give a young person a work placement or do a workshop in school, or, you know, make more entry-level opportunities, whatever it might be, that would be really powerful. So I think if the City Office and other city partners, Business West, BITC plus could help kind of bring together all those employers, I think the impact would be really great.
Fabulous, thank you both. David?
Yeah, I think for us is we've had responses following our presentation, so it's following up with each of the employers and each of the VCSE sectors that kind of fed back, and then effectively linking them in through Bristol Works and seeing how well we can link them in with some of the young people that we're working with in a few of our programs, because a large majority of our outputs and outcomes from the combined authority through the Mayor's Priority Skills Fund and through Trailblazer is all about moving young people into EAT, be that education, employment and training, and it's about that kind of those taster sessions. That first job is really important for a lot of our young people, because that is where they develop. We talked about skills, that's where they develop most of their skills that will be transferred into future roles. So again, it's kind of how well we can kind of link up with the work that we're doing through Bristol Works, through the Future Ready programs, increasing work experience for young people from free school meals and low attendance backgrounds across the city and southwest, and how well we can kind of support those young people to then actually have a real world experience of work placement, and then tie that and they move in on the post 16. And then again, for some of our young people with special educational needs and disabilities with education, health and care plans, it's that what next at 19, and how again we can link them on with employers, thinking about adults whenever they have complex needs and disabilities, but how to move them into employment. And it's about having those disability confident employers that we can kind of link on with and kind of use the supported internship model to get them ready to move them into those sectors as well.
Great, thank you, David. So in 1 minute or less, Grace, what's next and how can City Office help?
Yeah, so last year we published something called the Race Equality Data Product, and that's a large collection of ethnicity data from some of Bristol's major employers, and that allowed us to see things like the breakdown of pay and what kind of diversity looks like at different levels of pay. We would really like to do that for different characteristics, so probably exploring something like that, and that did include some intersectional data, but there's probably some more work to do there. And obviously the kind of the statutory reporting comes in soon, so we'll see that kind of first round around April next year, I think. So probably some analysis on what organisations are doing in their action plan is kind of what's next, and an offer to say that we have lots of kind of working groups across the city related with kind of EDI professionals and HR professionals. So if people are interested, they're welcome to contact, and City Office can be that convener, which I see is the kind of the key role there.
We love convening. Always happy to convene. Brilliant. Thank you, Grace. And then finally, Mark, what's next for you? And
What's
how
next?
can we help?
Well, tomorrow we have a meeting of the Bristol Repair Coalition. You others watching this are always welcome to join the coalition. Look us up through the Repair Act's website or email UE, actually, engineering our future at ue.ac.gov.ac.ac.uk if you want to be part of the Repair Coalition. So that's one way forward. And immediately after that, we'll be looking to what we take to the next Environment Board. And then out of that will come suggestions practically about how we can use both the One City initiative, but also the collaboration with other boards to go forward. Because I think that's been one of the outcomes for me that's been particularly exciting, is to see the Economy Board and the Environment Board having discussions together about these initiatives. But also it's so relevant to so many other projects that the One City initiative is trying to generate. So I'm very happy to be part of that in the future, and also really happy to be part of trying to encourage Bristol to be genuinely ambitious with these initiatives. The multi-bank has amazing potential, £4 million for a project in the southwest to pioneer initiatives related to the circular economy. I hope it's successful. I hope it includes as much of the ambition that we've discussed today, and I hope it is a catalyst for other similar ideas in the future.
It's such an exciting time, isn't it? Thank you. Thank you. So it's just up to me now just to draw this to a conclusion. As I said, I feel like we could have spoken for at least another hour, but I'm sorry, we're going to have to wrap it up. But just to say a massive thank you to all of you, to all the contributors, both for your really interesting, stimulating input into this conversation and for all the work you put into the gathering a month ago, into turning that to the success it was. Hugely appreciated. And also just to say to anybody watching, to say if you want to keep in touch, want to follow what's going on, then do sign up to the One City newsletter. You can follow us on LinkedIn and look out for the next One City gathering, which will be coming along before you know it, which will be on our mission around building strong, cohesive communities. So we're looking forward to that. So that's to say thank you again to everybody, and have a great afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Thanks
Jude.
everyone.
Thanks.